Does Kirill Kaprizov have a chance to actually catch Alex Ovechkin in the goals department at some point during his career? Probably not, but we take a look at the possibilities and we look at a much more likely target that Kirill could pass at some point in his career today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild. Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. Just a reminder, Locked on Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. It is available anytime you want to listen to your podcasts as well. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we dive a little deeper into Kirill Kaprizov's stats to see if he has a chance to maybe someday catch Alex Ovechkin in the goals category. We'll also take a look at if he has a chance to catch another player who is up the leaderboard for the Minnesota Wild, that of course being Marian Gaborik. We'll take a look at all the numbers with Kirill Kaprizov in his young career on today's show. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, your veteran Minnesota sports content producer with over a decade's worth of experience covering your favorite Minnesota teams, and now donning the green and red, covering the Wild for Locked on Wild. Happy to have you along for a Wednesday edition of the show. And we are going to project. We're going to go off into the distance and play around with some numbers here for today's episode of Locked on Wild, because was scrolling through Twitter, as always, and came upon a pretty interesting tweet from within the last couple of days. It mentions the fact, and it is from Byron Bader, creator of Hockey Prospecting, an NHL draft consultant and data scientist with his work featured on Sportsnet, TSN, and The Athletic. Made mention of this earlier yesterday. Just realized Kirill Kaprizov is now over a point per game in his 89 NHL games. If he plays at a point per game or greater over his NHL career, he will become only the 17th player drafted in the last 30 years to do so. What a talent. What a talent indeed. And for Kaprizov, has already hit several accolades in his short career already. As mentioned, he's got 95 points in 89 career games, has 43 goals in those 89 career games. So currently scoring at a .48 goals per game clip. Now, keep that number in mind for later during today's episode. But as mentioned, he also has shattered most of the Wild rookie records that existed before this season, and also became the quickest player in Minnesota Wild history to record 40 points in a season. So doing a lot of things that lead us to believe at this early juncture of his career that he could be destined for a huge amount of success in a Minnesota Wild uniform, and hopefully sticking around for the long haul to shatter every record that exists for this Wild franchise. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at how his pace, where his pace would need to be if he were to have a similar type career to the likes of Alex Ovechkin. And obviously that's a lofty goal to set. And so we'll also kind of try to go a little more realistic, a little bit of a softer target too, in Marian Gaborik, somebody who I think is a much more attainable goal for Kirill Kaprizov here in the near term, as we'll talk about just with some of the things that Ovechkin has done to get to his level of goal scoring in the NHL. So before we get into that, though, let's take a look at some of the things that Kirill Kaprizov has going in his favor that could allow him to really put up some nifty goal totals throughout his career. Number one, he is at this point in his career, very durable. Kaprizov missed one game in his rookie campaign, played in 55 out of a possible 56 games, and to this point in the season has missed one game. That, of course, was after the hit the Boston Bruins. Trent Frederick levied on him, cheap shot, into the boards, left in the mid stages of that game against the Boston Bruins, missed the game against the Washington Capitals. We thought at that point, season's over, going to miss a bunch of time, probably the rest of the season. And he came back and played after missing one game. So obviously, at this young stage in Kaprizov's career, he is very durable and has been able to show that he is going to be somebody that is out there pretty much any night he is available to play. The other factor that Kaprizov has going for him so far in his career is the dynamic scoring ability that so many players that have come through NHL circles just lack in their repertoire. And he has shown that he is somebody that can take over a game, whether it be throughout the course of the night or at various points, can step up and can just take over and really do what's needed in order to get his team the win. So durability, dynamic scoring ability, and you look at the speed that he brings, the puck handling that he brings to the table. It really is the total package that you look for in an elite goal scorer in the NHL. So Kaprizov has all of those things that you look for in a player that is a dynamic talent. And so there's no reason to suggest that he can't go on to put up, 300 goals, 400, 500, depending on how long his career ends up going. Obviously, getting a little bit later of a start due to his time in the KHL, but still, as we'll talk about when we put him up against what Alex Ovechkin has done so far in his career. A little bit behind the eight ball to catch some of those numbers, but still, as we'll talk about when we compare him to what Marian Gaborik was able to do, still has plenty of time to put up some absolutely just mind-boggling numbers throughout the course of his career. So going to be really interesting to see kind of where things stack up. And we'll start it with arguably this generation's greatest goal scorer and one of the greatest goal scorers to ever do it. Maybe when all is said and done, the greatest goal scorer to ever do it. We'll take a look at where Kirill Kaprizov would need to go to get to Alex Ovechkin numbers. That is next here on Locked On Wild. It is 2022, and that means New Year's resolutions are in full swing. And if you are trying to eat a little better, get a little bit more in shape, make sure to put Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, and I'll say it right now, tastes even better than a candy bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Most contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your favorite candy bar, and they usually have 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So if you have a full stash of treats, Twix bars, any other candy bar, go through the house, throw them out. Grab a Built Bar, and you'll have yourself a dynamic snack that will help you look and feel better all year long. So head to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off of your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild. And again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Historical context for what Kirill Kaprizov would need to do throughout the majority of his career in order to attain some goal marks. And if he has a chance to maybe go toe to toe with the great Alex Ovechkin. So, charted this out in a spreadsheet. So if I look like I'm zoning out, it's just trying to read what I put down here. So let's look at the numbers. And Ovechkin scored last night too. So he's up to 757 goals now. And in terms of where Kaprizov needs to go in order to potentially catch him, way behind. And that's not any disservice to Kirill Kaprizov, who has looked great so far in his career. Uh, Ovechkin hit the ground running and put up 52 goals in his age 20 season. In fact, he put up 475 career goals in his 20s alone. Had seasons of 52, 46, 65 goals, 56, 50, 32, 38, 32, 51, 53. And so the big thing to kind of keep in mind here, this number that we're going to be keeping an eye on here throughout the episode, is the goals per game average. And so in 760 games in Alex Ovechkin's 20s, he averaged .62 goals per game during that span. He topped out at .79 with that 65 goal season when he was 22. So even doing the math there, Kirill Kaprizov is well over 200 goals behind him, even with what Kaprizov has already done, because Ovechkin played at age 20, 21, 22, and 23, and his low goal mark in those 4 seasons was 46. So Ovechkin had just this unbelievable start to his career. Started at age 20 and just has never looked back since. And as we'll talk about with Marian Gaborik, there was no fluctuation. There is no fluctuation in his goals scored per game percentage. And so you look at it, you go to Ovechkin's 30s. So he has currently played 477 games in his 30s and has scored 282 goals so far. His goals per game average in his 30s is at .59. So a little bit of a dip, but let's also keep in mind that the number of games has dropped off here over the last couple of seasons. And Ovechkin did have a season when he was 31 in which he scored I say just in jest. He scored 33 goals in 82 games that year. So that was a .4 goals scored per game percentage in that season. But the rest of the years in his 30s, his age 30 season, he was at .63 goals per game. 32, he was at .6. 33, he was at .63. 34, .71 when he had 48 goals in 68 games 2 years ago. Was at .53 last year and is at .68 so far this season. So all in all, 757 goals in 1,237 games. That equates out to .61 goals per game through the course of his career. So bear with me here because we took Kirill Kaprizov's numbers already. He 43 goals in 89 career games. And the math again for that is .48 goals per game. So needs to up it to get close to the Alex Ovechkin mark, and actually did a little bit of the math as to just try to give some scope of what Kaprizov needs to do to make this happen. So let's just say, with 46 games remaining the rest of the way, let's just say that 47 games the rest of the way. Let's just say Kaprizov plays in 46 of them. Let's just say, for argument's sake, he scores 30 goals the rest of the way. That would be a 0.65 goals per game pace. And if we go to 80 games played, just using that as an average, just trying to make the math easy here, 80 games per season for his age 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29 seasons, and 45 goals per season. That gets him a 0.56 goals per game percentage. That leaves him in his 20s with 255 goals and a 0.57 goals per game average. 255 goals in 446 games. So the 20s is not where Kaprizov is going to catch up here in this competition. Because if you remember, Alex Ovechkin, who started playing when he turned 20, he had 475 goals in his 20s. The 30s is where Kaprizov is going to theoretically make up the ground. If we just assume, again, 80 games per season, just to make the math easy, and 45 goals per season from age 30 to age 39, that gives Kaprizov 450 goals in his 30s. That would be in 800 games. So that's 10 seasons right there. 45 goals per season, a 0.56 goals per game mark. That gets him still 9 goals short of what Alex Ovechkin is currently doing in the NHL. That would get Kaprizov, with what he's already done, what we have him down for doing in his 20s, and what we have for him down for doing in his 30s. That would get him to 748 career goals, a 0.56 goals per game average in 1,335 games. So in order to even come close to what Alex Ovechkin has done, Kaprizov is going to need to basically average 45 goals a season from age 25 to age 39. Is it possible? I mean, I suppose it's possible, but I think if this has shown me anything, it's that we need to rediscover our appreciation for what Alex Ovechkin has done throughout his career. That is an absurd amount of longevity, because you are throwing out the possibility of any sort of lengthy injury, a lockout, anything. You're throwing out all of those possibilities to even come close to what Alex Ovechkin has already done. So probably a little bit too lengthy, too high of a goal, too lofty of a goal for a player like Kirill Kaprizov. And I know he's in his second season. We're doing this for fun. Just think about that for a second. He would have to average 45 goals a season from his age 25 season, from his age 24 season even, because he's got, I think he has 15 goals so far this year, 16 goals. And let's assume that he adds 30 the rest of this year. So he has to average from 2021, 2022 to 2036, 2037. He has to average 45 goals a season just to get close, just to get to 9 goals back of Alex Ovechkin. It's unbelievable. Alex Ovechkin is the best. And he's continuing to do it. He just continues to score. And he's not slowing down at all. Again, scored last night. So 757 goals now for Ovechkin. This would get Kirill to 748. So a little bit too lofty probably for Kirill Kaprizov's career, but I do have a better target in mind. When we come back, we'll take a look at what he would need to do to get to Marian Gaborik levels of goal scoring. That is next as we project Kirill Kaprizov's career next here on Locked On Wild. BetOnline.ag would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline.ag remains the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code LOCKEDON to get all the fun started. The NFL playoffs underway. The NBA continues their season. College basketball, the NHL, boxing, and UFC all available. They have everything all the way down to your favorite Vegas casino games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild, gazing into our crystal ball to look ahead to see what Kirill Kaprizov might do with the rest of his career. Obviously, Alex Ovechkin's goals mark is maybe a little bit too attainable, but we're going to finish by looking at the career of a Minnesota great, that being, of course, Marian Gaborik. And so charted Gaborik's career just like we did for Ovechkin. And the numbers for Gaborik still very impressive. 407 goals in his career in 1,035 games. So a .39 goals per game average. Obviously with Gaborik, more injuries, more trades factored in here. So this seems like a much more attainable mark for Kirill Kaprizov. Some of the highlights for Gaborik: a couple of 40-goal seasons. Had a 40-goal season in 2007, 2008 in 77 games. So a .55 goals per game average there. His high mark for his career came in 2008, 2009, played in 17 games and scored 13 goals. Also had a 42-goal season in 2009, 2010. That was a .55 goals per game clip for him as well. Finished his 20s with 324 goals in 722 games. That's .45 goals per game. And then finished his 30s with 83 goals in 313 career games. That was a .27 goals per game average. But again, started to kind of get slowed down by injuries there at the end. So now, what does the math look like for Kirill Kaprizov if we kind of dial it back a little bit here? So we are just going to assume, and actually I'm going to adjust this on the fly because I had it set that Kaprizov was going to somehow get 30 goals the rest of this season. So he's got 16 right now. Let's just say he gets 20 the rest of this season in 46 games. That would be .43 goals per game the rest of the way. That would give him 36 for the season, which I think is right about what it needs to be for the rest of this year. Then, if we go from his age 25 season to his age 39 season and say he averages 30 goals a game per season, he'll finish his 20s with 213 career goals. So again, looking at what Gaborik did, he finished with 324 goals. But keep in mind, Gaborik started playing when he was 18. Kaprizov started playing a bit later than that. In fact, when he turned 23. So has some room, has some need to catch up a little bit, and he will in his 30s. So we're saying 30 goals a season, 0.38 goals per game. If he averages 30 goals a year from age 30 to age 39, again, 10 seasons, easy math. Just tried to keep this as easy as possible. 300 goals gives him a total of 513. So you had the 213, then the 300 in his 30s. And the best part is that you look at that math on the I'm going to call it the Gaborik plan. You look at that math. If he stays healthy, I think 30 goals is a very good number for an average season. And with the fact that he started here in the NHL at 23, who's to say that he doesn't keep going until 37, 38, 39, somewhere in there if he's still being productive? Obviously, if he were to retire a little earlier than that, well, then you maybe deduct 3 seasons off of that, and you have him play till he turns 36. And so then if you deduct 90 from that, you get to 423 goals. Still able to achieve and beat that mark of Marian Gaborik. So the grand scheme of things in this entire exercise was just to try to kind of plant the seed. Kirill Kaprizov is a dynamic scorer. He is a durable player, at least so far to this point in his career. If he continues to be able to score at right around a 30-goal clip for the rest of his career, which I think is, on the lower end of what he's capable of, he ends up with more goals than Marian Gaborik had. If he does better than that, well, I know that Ovechkin mark is a little crazy, but who knows? Who knows what Kirill Kaprizov could accomplish and where his career will take him. So that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked on Wild. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. And now that you're finished with today's episode, make sure to check out the Locked on Bets podcast, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. Locked on Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Locked on Bets is free and available on all podcast platforms. Just like Locked on Wild, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us anytime you want to listen. You can also find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We've got great content on all of those platforms every single day, keeping you up to date on all things Minnesota Wild, because if a puck drops in the state of hockey, Locked on Wild has you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.